Damien Holt stood in the Grandmaster study, swirling a glass of 50-year-old Macallan as thunder rattled the enormous windows. Outside, a storm lashed the Hamptons, but inside the room the air felt far more dangerous. He caught his reflection in the mirror above the fireplace. 42, sharp-jawed, dressed in a bespoke Armani suit with a Patek Philippe watch gleaming on his wrist. He looked exactly like the tech mogul he had become. Across from him sat his wife, Ellie. She seemed small in the intimidating room he had designed to impress. A simple beige cardigan, jeans, her hair in a loose bun, and only a silver locket around her neck. She held a book, one finger marking her page, watching him with quiet confusion and a growing sense of dread. "Did you hear me, Ellie?" Damien asked, his voice deceptively calm. He still hadn't turned to face her. "I heard you," she answered softly, though her hands trembled against the book cover. "You want a divorce?" "I don't just want a divorce," he corrected, finally turning. His eyes were cold, nothing like the warmth they once held when they met in a dusty university library years ago. "I need a divorce. Look at you, Ellie. Look at this." He gestured at her as if her very presence offended the modern decor. "Stagnation. We've grown apart." Ellie tried to reason with him. "I know you've been busy with the company. I prefer a quieter life, but we can work on it." Damien laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Ellie, wake up. I'm on the cover of Forbes. I'm meeting senators and oil tycoons. And you? You're still acting like the librarian's assistant I felt sorry for back then. You bake bread, you garden, you read." He spat the last word like an insult. "You don't fit the brand. You're an anchor, and I'm a rocket ship." Ellie slowly closed her book and set it on the side table. "So all those years of marriage, supporting you when Vantage Systems was nothing but a laptop and debt, nursing you through your scares, that makes me an anchor." Damien scoffed and walked to his desk. He picked up a thick manila envelope and tossed it onto her lap. "I bought you clothes you never wear, jewelry that sits in a safe. Now I'm giving you a generous severance package." "Severance package?" Ellie whispered. "I'm your wife, Damien, not an employee. It's a check for $200,000, he said, ignoring the hurt in her voice. "And the deed to that little cottage your aunt left you. That's more than enough for a woman of your simple tastes." Ellie didn't touch the envelope. She looked up at him, her gray eyes darkening. "And the house? This estate?" Damien smirked and spread his arms wide. "The Holt estate stays with the Holts, obviously. I bought this place. I paid for the renovations. I built the East Wing. This is my legacy." Ellie rose slowly. She was shorter than him, yet in that moment she seemed to fill the room. "Damien, you need to be very careful about what you do next. You think you know everything about our finances, about this property, but you don't." He rolled his eyes. "Don't start with your cryptic nonsense. My lawyers drew up the prenup. Everything I acquired during the marriage is mine because you made zero financial contribution. You signed it, Ellie, remember?" "I remember signing a document you put in front of me because I trusted you," she said. "But there are things about this land." "Stop." Damien slammed his hand on the desk. "I am done listening to you. I have guests arriving soon, important guests. I want you packed and gone before the first car pulls into the driveway." "Gone?" Ellie blinked. "Tonight? In this storm?" "Call an Uber. Take the SUV to the gate." "I don't care." He sneered. "Just get out. I have a life to live, and it starts the second you walk out that door." Ellie stared at him for a long, heavy silence. She saw the man she had once loved, the man she had secretly protected from bankruptcy more than once without him ever knowing, and realized he was truly gone. In his place stood a monster built of ego and greed. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll pack." Damien looked surprised she gave in so easily. He had expected screaming, crying, begging. Her calm unsettled him, but he brushed it aside. "She knows she's beaten," he thought. "She knows she's nothing without me." Ellie walked to the door, her hand on the brass handle. She paused. "I hope you enjoy the house, Damien, while it lasts." She closed the door softly behind her. Damien chuckled and took a sip of scotch. "While it lasts, it's going to last forever, darling. It's my kingdom." He checked his watch. Sienna would be here soon. He needed the old debris cleared out before the new centerpiece arrived. In the massive walk-in closet, Ellie moved like a sleepwalker. The space was larger than her first apartment. On one side hung Damien's rows of Italian suits. On the other, her modest sweaters and dresses. She pulled down a vintage leather suitcase, the same one she had brought when they first moved here. She packed only her wool sweaters, worn jeans, 3 favorite first edition novels, and a small wooden jewelry box that had belonged to her grandmother. She left the diamond earrings and Cartier watch behind. The roar of an engine cut through the rain. Not just any engine, the aggressive growl of a Porsche 911 GT3. Ellie walked to the window. Headlights sliced through the downpour as a bright yellow sports car skidded to a stop in front of the fountain she had personally designed. A long leg in a red-soled Christian Louboutin heels stepped into a puddle. It was Sienna Ross. Everyone knew who she was, an influencer, an aspiring actress who had been clinging to Damien's arm at charity events for months. Damien claimed she was a brand ambassador for Vantage Systems. Ellie wasn't stupid. She simply hadn't realized he would be bold enough to bring her here, to their home, before the divorce papers were even dry. The front door slammed downstairs. High heels clicked across the marble floor. "Damien, baby, it is absolutely pouring out there. I've got a towel, darling. Come here." Damien's voice drifted up, thick with an affection he hadn't shown Ellie in years. Ellie zipped her suitcase. Her heart pounded not with heartbreak, but with a cold, simmering anger. She grabbed the handle and reached the top of the stairs just as Damien and Sienna embraced in the foyer. Sienna wore a skin-tight red dress that left little to the imagination. She was undeniably beautiful in a glossy, manufactured way. When she pulled back and saw Ellie, a triumphant smirk curled her red lips. "Oh," Sienna said, feigning surprise. "Is the help still here?" Damien laughed. "She's just leaving, Sienna. Don't worry." Ellie descended one step at a time. The heavy thud of her boots was the only sound in the cavernous hall. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom and looked down at them. "Hello, Sienna. I see you didn't waste any time." Sienna tossed her hair. "Life moves fast, sweetie. You have to keep up or you get left behind. Damien told me you were quaint, but seeing you in that sweater, you look like you're ready for a retirement home, not a mansion. This house requires a lot of upkeep," Ellie said, her voice flat. "It respects history. It respects class, something neither of you seems to possess." Damien's face flushed. "Watch your mouth, Ellie. You're a guest in my house now. A deeply unwelcome one." "Your house?" Ellie repeated, a dry smile touching her lips. "You keep saying that because it is," Damien shouted, losing his temper. He marched over, snatched a suitcase from her hand, and dragged it to the front door. He threw the heavy oak doors open, letting wind and rain swirl into the pristine foyer, then hurled the suitcase outside. It landed with a wet thud on the driveway, instantly soaked. "Get out!" he roared, pointing into the storm. "Take your trash and go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." Sienna giggled, clinging to his arm. "Yeah, go back to the library." Ellie walked to the open door. Cold wind whipped her hair across her face. She looked at the suitcase lying in the mud, then turned back to the couple bathed in golden chandelier light. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the keys to the Range Rover Damien had bought for the family, and dropped them on the console table. "I'll call a taxi," she said. "Don't bother waiting inside," Damien sneered. "Wait on the porch. I don't want you dripping on the floors." Ellie stepped out into the rain. The water soaked her instantly, chilling her to the bone. She didn't run. She walked with her head high, picked up the heavy wet suitcase, and moved to the edge of the portico. Behind her, The heavy doors slammed shut and the deadbolt slid home. She was alone. Homeless. Soaking wet, Ellie pulled out her phone, shielding it from the rain. She didn't call a taxi. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Sterling residence, Winston speaking. A crisp, elderly voice answered. Winston, Ellie said, her voice cracking for a moment before she steadied it. It's Eleanor. It's time. Initiate the Sterling protocol and call the board of directors. The protocol. Winston's voice dropped to a whisper. Miss Eleanor. That will destroy him. That will take everything. Ellie looked back at the mansion. Through the window she could see Damien pouring champagne for Sienna. They were toasting, celebrating her removal. I know, she said, her voice hardening into something cold and unbreakable. He threw me out of my own house, Winston. Now I'm going to remind him who actually owns the ground he's standing on. Very well, Winston said, papers rustling in the background. I will have the car there in 10 minutes. And Miss Eleanor, welcome back. The taillights of a Rolls-Royce Phantom cut through the rain like red lasers. It wasn't a taxi. It was a custom-built armored vehicle worth more than Damien's entire fleet of sports cars combined. The rear door opened, held by a uniformed chauffeur who didn't flinch at the storm soaking his livery. Ellie sank into the hand-stitched leather seats. The warmth of the cabin wrapped around her instantly. Sitting across from her, holding a thermos of tea and a heated towel, was Winston. Silver-haired, 70 years old, eyes that had seen 3 generations of Sterling family secrets. He wasn't just a butler. He was the executor of the Sterling Trust, a legal entity that controlled vast Manhattan real estate, Pacific shipping lines, and unknown to Damien Holt, the very ground his precious mansion stood on. Here, Miss Eleanor, Winston said gently, handing her the towel. Dry yourself. You're shivering. Ellie wrapped the warm cloth around her face, inhaling the scent of lavender. When she lowered it, the tears were gone. Her eyes were dry and clear. Did you bring the file? I did, Winston said, tapping a black leather briefcase beside him. Though I must admit, I never thought we would actually have to use it. I always hoped Mr. Holt would prove me wrong. He didn't, Ellie said, her voice devoid of emotion. He failed, Winston. In every way a man can fail. The car glided down the winding road, passing the massive iron gates of the Holt estate. Ellie didn't look back. Take us to the penthouse, she instructed. And call the team. I want a forensic audit of Vantage Systems started immediately. I want every penny I ever funneled into his company through the shell corporations identified and frozen. Winston nodded, pulling out a tablet. And regarding the estate? Ellie allowed a small, cold smile. Let's clarify something, Winston. It's not the Holt estate. It's Plot 44B of the Sterling Hamptons estate. Damien thinks he bought that land. He bought the rights to build. He signed a 99-year ground lease with Argos Land Management. He was so eager to start building his monument to himself that he didn't have his lawyers read the termination clauses. Clause 17, she recited from memory. In the event of the lessee filing for divorce against the primary beneficiary of the Sterling Trust or engaging in acts of moral turpitude on the premises, the ground lease is immediately revoked and all structures upon said land revert to the ownership of the lessor. Winston chuckled darkly. He thinks he owns the house because he paid for the bricks and mortar. He forgets that in real estate, the person who owns the dirt owns everything. He kicked me out into the rain, Winston, Ellie whispered, looking out at the blurring highway lights. He treated me like a vagrant, like I was nothing. And tomorrow, Winston said, typing commands that would wake lawyers across time zones, he will learn that he is the one trespassing. The car sped toward New York City. Ellie was no longer the scorned wife. She was Eleanor Sterling, sole heiress to a $4 billion fortune she had kept hidden to find true love. She had played the role of supportive, simple wife, perfectly cooking his meals, ironing his shirts, secretly injecting millions into his failing tech ventures through anonymous angel investors so his ego wouldn't bruise. She had built him, and now, piece by piece, she was going to dismantle him. The sun rose over the Hamptons, bathing the wet lawns in glittering gold. Inside the master bedroom, Damien Holt stretched beneath high thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets. He rolled over. Sienna was still asleep, her blonde hair fanned across the pillow Ellie used to use. He felt a surge of triumph. He had shed the dead weight. No more boring dinners, no more lectures about humility, no more Ellie. He was free. He slipped into a silk robe and stepped onto the balcony. He looked out over his domain, the 10-acre estate, the infinity pool, the tennis courts, the garage housing his Ferraris. All mine, he murmured, sipping espresso from the bedroom machine. He frowned. Usually by this hour the house buzzed with staff. The scent of fresh pastries should be rising from the kitchen. The pool boys should be skimming leaves. Whatever. They were probably terrified after his shouting match last night. Good. Fear-motivated people. Damien walked downstairs expecting breakfast laid out. The kitchen was empty, not just empty of people, but of things. The counters were bare. The silver fruit bowl was gone. The coffee maker was unplugged. Hello? He called. Greta? Chef Marco? Silence. He walked into the hallway. The fresh flowers that were usually changed daily were missing. The vase was gone. In the living room, the curtains were drawn. On the center table in the foyer, where he had thrown the keys at Ellie the night before, sat a single white envelope. It wasn't a handwritten note. It was a formal document on thick cream stationery embossed with a logo he didn't recognize, Argos Land Management. He ripped it open. The letter informed him that pursuant to the ground lease agreement, the lease for the land at the estate was terminated effective immediately. As per the reversion clause, all improvements, structures, and fixtures now belonged to the lessor. He had 48 hours to vacate. Failure to comply would result in removal by private security. Damien stared at the paper, then burst out laughing. Scammers, he muttered, crumpling it and throwing it on the floor. Probably some phishing attempt. Argos Land Management? He owned this place. He called his lawyer, loud enough to wake Sienna. Philip, I just got some joke letter about a ground lease. Who the hell is Argos Land Management? There was a long silence on the other end. Philip, you there? Damien, I was just looking into this. I thought you owned the land outright, but I'm looking at the county records right now. You don't. You bought the building rights. The land is held in a blind trust. What are you talking about? I paid $12 million for this property. You paid $12 million to build the house, Philip corrected. The land deed is in the name of a holding company. And looking at the bylaws, if you divorce, the lease dissolves. Fix it. Damien screamed, his voice echoing in the empty kitchen. I don't care what it costs. Sue them. Buy the land. Who owns Argos? That's the problem, Philip said. Argos is a shell. It's owned by a holding company in the Caymans, which is owned by a trust in Delaware. It's a fortress. I can't find a human name attached to it. There is always a name. Damien roared. Find it. He hung up, hands shaking. He needed a drink. He went to the wine cellar. Locked. He punched in the code. Error. Tried again. Error. What is going on? He hissed. Sienna walked in wearing one of his shirts, looking annoyed. Babe, the Wi-Fi isn't working. I can't upload my morning story. And where is the chef? I want avocado toast. Shut up, Sienna. Excuse me? Her eyes widened. Don't talk to me like that. I'm not Ellie. No. Damien muttered. You're not. Ellie knew how to fix things. The doorbell rang, not a polite chime, but a long, insistent buzz. Damien marched to the front door and threw it open. Two men in dark suits stood there. They weren't police. They looked like private military contractors. Behind them, a tow truck was backing up to the garage. Can I help you? Damien demanded, trying to project authority, Mr. Holt? The larger man asked, checking a clipboard. We are here to repossess the assets belonging to Vantage Systems and its primary investors. Repossess? Damien laughed incredulously. I am the CEO of Vantage Systems. I am the investor. Actually, sir, the man said calmly, according to a filing made this morning, the majority shareholder, the Angel Group, has called in their loans. Since the company lacks the liquidity to pay, they have seized collateral. What collateral? The company vehicles, the man said, pointing to the garage. And your executive salary accounts have been frozen pending an embezzlement investigation. Embezzlement? Damien screamed. I built this company. Sir, please step aside. The man signaled the tow truck driver. Damien watched in horror as the garage doors he hadn't opened began to rise. Someone else was controlling his smart house. No, that's my Porsche. That's my Ferrari. He ran toward the garage, but the large man stepped into his path like a wall. Step back, sir, or we will call the local authorities. Sienna came running onto the porch, phone in hand, recording. Oh my God, Damien! They're taking the cars. Is this a prank? Are we being punked? Put the phone away. Damien swatted at her. Hey! Sienna yelled. Don't touch me. Damien stood in the driveway, barefoot, watching as his prized yellow Porsche, the one Sienna had arrived in the night before, was hooked to the tow truck. This is a mistake, he whispered, face pale. This is a massive clerical error. I'm going to sue everyone. I'm going to ruin everyone. But deep down, a terrifying thought took root. The land lease, the frozen accounts, the smart house turning against him. It was coordinated, precise, personal. Who had the power to do this? He thought of Ellie, quiet, mousy Ellie with her books and knitting. No, impossible. She was probably crying in a motel room right now. She didn't have the teeth for this. His phone buzzed. A text from Philip. Damien stared at the screen, thumbs trembling. Who? The three dots bubbled for what felt like forever. Then a single name appeared. Sterling. Damien frowned. Sterling? Like the old money dynasty that owned half of Manhattan? What did they have to do with him? Another text from Philip. I looked into Eleanor's maiden name. On the marriage license she put Eleanor S. Vance. We never asked what the S stood for. The blood drained from Damien's face so fast he nearly fainted. He dropped the phone on the wet pavement. Eleanor Sterling. He looked up at the mansion, the towering columns, the sprawling wings, the symbol of his power. It wasn't his. It had never been his. He had been living in a dollhouse, and the owner had just taken the roof off. The realization hit him with physical force. He staggered back, leaning against one of the stone pillars. Sterling, he whispered. Sienna was still screaming at the tow truck driver, but her voice sounded distant, underwater. Damien's mind raced back through the years. Meeting Ellie in the university library. She wore thrift store clothes, drove a beat-up Honda, never talked about family. He had assumed she was ashamed of being poor. God, I was so blind. She wasn't ashamed of poverty. She was hiding from wealth. She was vetting him. She wanted to know if he loved her for herself or for the Sterling billions. And for years he had passed the test until yesterday. Damien. Sienna grabbed his arm, nails digging in. Do something. They're taking the Bentley now. My purse is in there. Damien shoved her off. Shut up, Sienna. The cars don't matter. The house doesn't matter. What do you mean the house doesn't matter? She screeched. Where are we going to live? I don't know. He roared. Suddenly the large digital screens lining the driveway flickered to life. A video feed appeared. It was Ellie. She wasn't wearing a cardigan. She wore a tailored white suit sharp enough to cut glass. Her hair was sleek and professional. She sat in a boardroom that looked like the bridge of a starship, surrounded by people in suits who looked far more important than anyone Damien had ever met. The audio crackled over the outdoor speakers, booming across the estate. Good morning, Damien. Ellie's voice was crisp, magnified, godlike. Sienna stopped screaming. The tow truck drivers paused. Even the birds seemed to go quiet. Damien stared up at the screen, mouth open. "Ellie? I see you received the eviction notice," she said calmly, twirling a fountain pen. "I apologize for the abruptness. But as you said last night, life moves fast. You have to keep up or you get left behind." "Ellie, wait," Damien stammered, stepping toward the screen as if he could plead with the pixels. "Baby, let's talk. This is insane. You're a sterling. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted a husband, Damien," Ellie replied. Her eyes on the screen were cold, devoid of the love that had been there for years. "Not a parasite. I supported you. I loved you. I built you. And you threw me out like trash because you thought you found something shinier." She glanced at Sienna on the screen. Sienna shrank back, suddenly looking small and cheap in the stolen shirt. "I'm canceling the IPO for Vantage Systems," Ellie announced casually. "No," Damien screamed. "You can't. That's my life's work. The board will never allow it." "I am the board, Damien," Ellie said. "The angel group that funded your rounds, that was me. The silent partner who bailed you out of the crypto crash. That was me. I own 61% of your company. And as of this morning, I have voted to remove the CEO for poor judgment." "You can't do this," Damien sobbed, falling to his knees in the driveway. "Ellie, please. I'm sorry. I was stressed. It was a mistake. Sienna means nothing to me. She's nobody." "Hey!" Sienna yelled, offended. "It's too late for apologies," Ellie said. She checked her watch. "You have exactly 1 hour before the security codes on the perimeter gates change. Anything left inside the house after that becomes mine. If you are still on the property, you will be arrested for trespassing." "Where am I supposed to go?" Damien cried. "You froze my accounts. I believe you have a severance package," Ellie said, voice dripping with irony. "I left a check for $200,000 in the mailbox. That should be more than enough for a man of your simple tastes." The screen went black. Damien knelt in the driveway, the silence deafening. 200,000. Sienna repeated, doing the math. She looked at Damien, then at the mansion, then at the departing tow trucks. She scoffed. "You're broke. Sienna, baby. We can fix this," Damien pleaded, reaching for her. "I just need a good lawyer." "You need a miracle," Sienna said, stepping back. "I'm not dating a broke guy with a crazy ex-wife who owns the planet. I'm out." She turned and walked down the long driveway toward the gate, heels clicking on the asphalt. "Sienna," Damien yelled. "You can't leave me. Not now. Watch me." She called back without turning. Damien was alone. He looked at the massive house looming over him. It looked different now. Not a castle, a fortress, and the drawbridge was closed. He scrambled to his feet. He had 1 hour. He had to get his watches, his cash stash in the safe, the bearer bonds. He ran to the front door and grabbed the handle. Locked. He pounded on the wood. "Open. Open up." The smart lock pad flashed red. Access denied. He ran to the back door. Locked. The windows? Reinforced storm glass. He was locked out. He couldn't even get inside to pack a bag. He remembered Ellie's words. "Take only what you came with." He looked down at himself. Silk pajamas and a robe. Barefoot. He had nothing. Rain clouds from the night before began to gather again, blocking out the sun. A rumble of thunder shook the ground. Damien Holt, the millionaire genius, sat on the steps of the mansion he thought he owned and put his head in his hands. But Ellie wasn't done. This was only the demolition. Now it was time for the renovation. In the weeks that followed the storm, Damien Holt sat on the edge of a sagging mattress in a run-down motel on the outskirts of Queens that smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. The neon sign outside buzzed incessantly, a flickering reminder of how far he had fallen. He no longer wore Armani. He wore a wrinkled button-down from a thrift store and trousers a size too big. His Patek Philippe watch was gone, pawn to pay for the first week, and a retainer for a lawyer who operated out of a strip mall. You have to have something. Damien barked into his prepaid burner phone. She stole my company. She stole my house, Mr. Holt. Please lower your voice. The lawyer, Marvin Klein, sighed on the other end. Marvin was cheap, sweaty, and the only attorney in New York who hadn't hung up the moment he heard the name Sterling. I've looked into the filings. It's ironclad. The company bylaws gave the majority shareholder the right to dismiss the CEO without cause if the valuation dropped. And when the news of your eviction hit the tabloids, Vantage Systems stock plummeted 14% because of her. Damien screamed, pacing the stained carpet. She manipulated the market, proving that is impossible, Marvin said. And the Angel Group, that's her. She essentially fired you from her own company. As for the house, you signed the ground lease. I read it. It's a standard reversionary interest clause used by old money families to keep outsiders from claiming their land. You walked into it, so I get nothing, Damien whispered, voice trembling with rage. All those years. I gave her all those years. You have the severance check, Marvin suggested. 200,000. That's not nothing. Damien looked at the check sitting on the nightstand. It mocked him. An insult. A tip left for a bad waiter. I don't want the scraps, he shouted. I want my life back. I want to destroy her, Marvin. Find me dirt. The Sterlings must have skeletons. Tax evasion. Illegal offshore accounts, something. Damien. Listen to me. Marvin's voice dropped. I got a call this morning from a firm called Pendleton and Associates. They politely informed me that if I continue to harass Eleanor Sterling with frivolous motions, they will file a grievance with the Bar Association and have my license revoked. They knew about my previous infractions. Damien froze. So you're quitting? I'm trying to stay employed, Marvin said. Good luck, Mr. Holt. Don't call me again. The line went dead. Damien threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. He sat in the silence, breathing heavily. He was alone. Sienna had blocked his number the moment the credit cards were declined. His friends in the Hamptons, the guys he played golf with, the investors he drank scotch with, had ghosted him. It was as if Damien Holt had never existed, but he still had one card to play. Years ago, Ellie had kept a private safe in the guest cottage, the one place on the estate Damien rarely visited. She kept sentimental things there. He remembered seeing a blue file once. She had closed the safe quickly when he walked in. If she was a Sterling, maybe that file contained family secrets, the leverage he needed. He couldn't get into the main mansion. It was a fortress now. But the guest cottage? It was on the edge of the property, near the old service road. It had an old-fashioned key lock, not a smart system. Damien stood up. A dark, desperate plan formed in his mind. He would break in. He would get the file. He would burn her empire to the ground. He grabbed his coat. He had just enough cash for a train ticket back to the Hamptons. It was time for a homecoming. The night was moonless, offering the cover he needed. He ditched a taxi a mile from the estate and walked through the woods, his Italian loafers the last remnant of his old life sinking into the mud. He reached the perimeter fence. To his surprise, the section near the old oak tree was still damaged from a storm the previous year. Ellie hadn't fixed it. Careless, he thought with a sneer. He squeezed through the gap, heart hammering. He was on the grounds. His grounds. He crept toward the guest cottage. It was dark. The main mansion, 100 yards away, blazed with light. He could see shadows moving in the windows. A party? A meeting? He didn't care. He reached the cottage door. He pulled out a tension wrench and pick he had bought online. He had spent nights watching lock-picking tutorials. It took 10 agonizing minutes, sweat dripping into his eyes, but finally the lock clicked. He pushed the door open and slipped inside. The cottage smelled of lavender and old paper. Ellie's scent. It made his stomach churn with a mix of nostalgia and hatred. He used his phone flashlight, sweeping the room. There, behind the painting of the lighthouse, was the wall safe. He knew the combination. It was the date they met. His fingers trembled as he punched the numbers. Beep, beep, beep. The light turned green. Got you, Damien whispered. He pulled the handle. The heavy steel door swung open, but the safe wasn't full of cash or diamonds. It didn't contain secret offshore bank codes or evidence of crimes. It contained a single thick leather binder. Damien grabbed it and sat on the floor, reading under the flashlight beam. He flipped it open. The first page was a document titled Project Holt Rehabilitation and Support Strategy. He frowned. He turned the page. It was a log, a detailed log of every major success in his career. One entry read, Damien is stressed about the payroll. He is too proud to ask for a loan. I have instructed Winston to route funds through the Angel Fund as an anonymous grant for promising tech startups. He thinks you won a contest. His smile tonight was worth every penny. Another, the SEC investigation regarding the accounting error could ruin him. It was an honest mistake, but they won't see it that way. I called family contacts at the firm. They made a call to the commissioner. The audit is dropped. Damien thinks his charming presentation saved him. I let him believe it. Another. He wants the mansion. It is too big, too ostentatious, but he needs to feel like a king. I have arranged for Argo's land to lease the property. If I bought it outright, he would feel small. I will let him put his name on the gate, even if the land is mine. I just want him to be happy. Damien flipped through the pages faster, breath hitching. There were hundreds of entries, every lucky break, every sudden investor, every legal miracle. It wasn't his genius. It wasn't his charm. It wasn't his hard work. It was Ellie. She hadn't just built the company financially. She had paved the road in front of him, sweeping away every obstacle before he could trip over it. She had spent millions, pulled dozens of strings, and used her family's immense power solely to prop up his fragile ego. She had loved him that much. She had built an entire world just for him to rule, content to sit in the shadows and knit, just so he could shine. And he had thrown her out in the rain for an influencer who left him over a car. No, Damien whimpered. The realization was more painful than the poverty. The poverty was just money. This was the destruction of his soul. He wasn't a self-made man. He was a pampered child playing with toys his wife had bought him. It's a compelling read, isn't it? The voice came from the doorway. Damien jumped, dropping the binder. Ellie stood there. She wasn't wearing a suit this time. She wore a stunning floor-length emerald gown. She looked like royalty. Flanking her were two large security guards and Winston, who looked at Damien with pure pity. How long have you been there? Damien croaked. We knew you were here the moment you crossed the fence line, Ellie said, stepping into the room. Thermal cameras, Damien. We upgraded the security. You did all this. Damien pointed at the binder on the floor. You controlled everything. I supported everything, Ellie corrected gently. There is a difference. I wanted you to succeed. I believed in you, Damien. I believed that under all that insecurity and bluster, there was a good man. I thought if I made you feel safe, if I made you feel powerful, that good man would finally come out. She took a step closer, her eyes sad. But the more I gave you, the more you wanted, and the less you saw me. I can change, Damien pleaded, scrambling to his knees. Ellie, I see it now. I see what you did. I can be that man. Take me back, please. I'll sign anything. I'll work in the mailroom. Just don't leave me out there with nothing. Ellie looked down at him. For a moment Damien saw a flicker of the old Ellie, the one who forgave him when he forgot anniversaries, the one who nursed him when he was sick. Then she looked at the ring on her finger. A new ring. A family signet ring. I can't do that, Damien, she said softly, because I finally realized something. You didn't love me. You loved the way I made you feel. You loved the reflection of yourself in my eyes. But now, the mirror's broken. She turned to the guards. Escort Mr. Holt off the property, she ordered, and call the police. I want to press charges for breaking and entering. What? No, Damien scrambled back. Ellie, you can't put me in jail. I'm your husband, ex-husband. Winston interjected, stepping forward. The decree came through this morning. Expedited, Ellie. Damien screamed as the guards grabbed his arms. They hauled him up like a sack of flour. Wait, Ellie said. The guards paused. Damien looked at her, hope flaring in his chest. Ellie walked over to the binder on the floor. She picked it up. She looked at it one last time, then tossed it into the lit fireplace. The dry paper caught fire instantly. The record of Damien's success began to curl and blacken in the flames. Goodbye, Damien, she said. She turned and walked out into the night, heading back toward the mansion where a string quartet was playing. Leaving Damien to be dragged into the darkness, the courtroom was packed. It wasn't a divorce hearing this time. It was a criminal trial. State of New York versus Damien Holt. The charges were severe: embezzlement, corporate fraud, and misappropriation of funds. The forensic audit Ellie had ordered that first night had uncovered everything. In his desperation to keep up his lavish lifestyle during the lean months, Damien had dipped into the employee pension fund. He had moved money from tax accounts to pay for the Porsche, for the diamonds he bought Sienna, for the trips to Stevie Bart's. He had thought he could put it back before anyone noticed, but he never did. Damien stood as the judge entered. He looked gaunt. His hair was thinning. The public defender beside him looked bored. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at him. Mr. Holt, in light of the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution and your own admission of guilt in the plea deal, I am sentencing you to 5 years in a federal correctional facility, followed by 5 years of probation. The gavel banged. Damien didn't cry. He was too tired to cry. He just nodded as the bailiff handcuffed him. He looked toward the back of the courtroom. He half expected to see Ellie there, maybe gloating, maybe crying, but the back benches were empty of Sterlings. Ellie hadn't come. She didn't send a lawyer. She didn't send Winston. She had completely, utterly moved on. He wasn't worth her time to even watch him fall. That indifference hurt more than any hatred could have. The sun shone brightly over the Hamptons. The Holt estate was gone. In its place stood the Eleanor Sterling Center for the Arts. The massive gates were open to the public. The driveway where Damien had been evicted was now filled with aspiring artists, musicians, and writers carrying instruments and portfolios. Ellie stood on the balcony, the same balcony where Damien used to drink his morning espresso and survey his kingdom. She was holding a cup of tea, watching the students below. She looked peaceful. She looked free. Miss Sterling. Ellie turned. It was a young man, perhaps 22, holding a violin case. He looked nervous. Yes? She smiled. I just wanted to say thank you, the young man stammered. My scholarship, I wouldn't be here without it. I heard this place used to belong to some tech billionaire who hated art. I'm glad you changed it. Ellie laughed, a genuine bright sound that carried on the wind. He didn't own it, she said, looking out at the horizon. He was just a tenant, and he forgot to pay the rent. She patted the young man on the shoulder. Go play. Make something beautiful. The young man ran off to join his friends. Ellie lingered on the balcony a moment longer. She touched a locket around her neck, the only piece of jewelry she had kept from before. She opened it. Inside, the picture of Damien was gone. In its place was a simple inscription. To thine own self be true. She snapped it shut, turned her back on the past, and walked inside to build a future that was finally, truly hers. And that is the tragic yet satisfying fall of Damien Holt. He had a woman who would have given him the world, but his ego convinced him he already owned it. It's a harsh lesson. Never mistake the generosity of a partner for your own power. And never, ever assume you're the smartest person in the room, especially when your name isn't on the deed. What did you think of Ellie's revenge? Was burning the binder the ultimate power move, or should she have shown the world he was a fraud? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for watching. And remember, be careful who you step on, because they might just own the ground you're standing on.